starting with this video, I'm going back to my old video format. I liked it a lot better and it was received well. I have been reacting to movies on my Twitch, shameless plug, explosion, shameless plug again, and just editing them down. But while that took a lot less time, it also took the labor of love part out of the YouTube videos, and I felt the need to give fluff style reaction, whereas in older videos I wrote an actual essay. I guess taking shortcuts as far as content creation works for everybody except me. Anyway, this is the 99th film in the New York Times 100 best movies of the 21st century. I don't know much about it besides it was created by Bong Joon Ho, who also created one of my favorite movies and is the #1 movie on the list, Parasite. So I have high hopes. The movie starts in a very rural, almost remote area in these wheat fields, and the shots are absolutely stunning. The countryside is always so beautiful in any country. These beautiful shots are juxtaposed with the fact that there is a dead woman left in a storm drain, which is such an uncommon occurrence that children are playing with the clothes of the dead woman 20 feet away, which you can definitely look at as a bit odd maybe, but I think it's to be looked at as a symptom of the innocence of not only the children, but the area that they live in. There's a montage of the detective doing interviews in order to investigate leads, and one thing I noticed during and post montage is just how unprepared everyone is for what seems to be building up. There was a second murder and there is no forensics team, which they probably don't even have. They likely have to call one from a bigger town or city, and there's children still running around the crime scene once again. I'm going to make a theory that a big theme in this movie will be the idyllic and innocent nature of this community clashing with the gruesome reality that there is a serial killer amongst them. A trope that I've always loved is a dysfunctional character who has a heart of gold. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about a character who is kind of a piece of shit but gets the job done and is ultimately a good person at their core that I like, which leads me to a larger point. The detective and the chief of police are having a conversation about why he is eating while staring at suspect photos, and he says, "I have a great eye for this. Being a detective is the only thing I'm good at." Hearing that, the chief challenges him to spot a rapist, and he stares at them for a moment, and the immediate next frame is the detective getting some cheeks, which completely threw me off to the point where it was almost funny how out of nowhere it was. But after collecting my thoughts, while it was shocking, it is a great storytelling device. It is to reinforce to us that this detective is a fucking degenerate. He is messy, crass, and an asshole. He is a good for nothing besides being a detective. I think this is also a good example of the Kuleshov effect. I don't know if I said that right, but which, if you don't know, is an effect in editing where basically the audience will assume or infer information that isn't explicitly stated based on the arrangement of scenes. For a moment, I almost like this cop, and just like that, it's gone because he started beating on a mentally handicapped dude. Like, he is literally known in town as the kid with a burned face who is mentally handicapped. A younger cop shows up from Seoul and gets beat up by the lead detective, but they worked it out. I'm hoping this becomes a buddy cop drama where the young cop softens the older cop's sharp edges and the young cop realizes that love is possible. 100 pages minimum, slow burn, impreg, print. So no impreg, which it's fine, you know what I mean, I didn't want it anyway, but I have gotten the roles mixed up. The younger detective seems to be a lot more competent, while the lead detective and the apparent bad cop take a mentally handicapped man into the forest in order to try and intimidate him into confessing the murder. But the young detective isn't buying it because, I don't know, he doesn't think a man with the mental faculties of a child can murder. The absolute idiot, the buffoon, the imbecile. Kids murder all the time. That's why you should put more kids in jail for even small things. It builds character. Nothing builds resilience like spending your developmental years learning to survive in prison. The father of the disabled man shows up when they are attempting to have the disabled man reenact crimes he didn't commit. They get in trouble and they have to let him go. The pacing and the direction of the movie is interesting. My expectation at the beginning of the movie that this was about a troubled but genius older detective who had a strong sense of right and wrong but could be morally gray to get there doesn't seem to be the case at all, and seems to go more in line with my theory that while this place may not be idyllic, they are incredibly ill-equipped to handle what is happening in town, not just resource-wise, but also as far as incompetence goes. The younger detective theorizes to the chief. I don't know the ranking here, and I'm bad at remembering names, especially ones in a language I don't speak, but the young guy theorizes that there is another body, and there is indeed a serial killer. They find the third victim, and sure enough, it's the same killer, and I have to once again commend the storytelling and editing of this film. The audience sees parts of the corpse as they talk about them, but we are not explicitly shown the gruesome act until until the very final moment of the scene. And once we do see her, it's immediately cut to meat being thrown on the grill. And once again, the editing and the storytelling of the film catches me off guard in a good way. The storytelling that is being told, but what is not being said. What that transition tells us without saying anything is that these women are viewed as nothing but meat in the killer's eyes. They aren't people, just something to be consumed. There's a backdrop of war or civil protests or something that I'm not familiar with. I'm not familiar with the history of Korea enough to comment on, but the copious amounts of police brutality this dude seems to be comfortable unleashing on women and disabled people is kind of crazy. There's another murder and they are completely stumped until a woman who I'm assuming is a secretary, which I'm not quite certain of because while she makes them coffee, they've also used her as bait for the serial killer. So while I'm not sure what she does, I'm certain she's underpaid for the kind of work they're asking her to do. Anyway, they're completely stumped until she gives them a clue that the killer may be calling into a radio station to play a specific song before he murders. I can't really tell if this movie is meant to be serious or a comedy or kind of a mix of both. The older detective is like, oh, he doesn't leave hair at the crime scenes because he has no pubic hair. And I guess in the 80s, not having pubic hair was about as distinctive of a trait as missing an arm. And the chief replies, how will we even check for that? And the immediate next shot is the detective at a public bath staring daggers at other dudes' dicks. I think the editing and the way everything is paced has to be my favorite part of the film. The plot isn't anything unheard of, and the dialogue isn't anything I'd talk to someone about the next day because they said something super cool or funny or witty or whatever. I mean, they very well could be. I don't speak Korean, so I'm only reading subtitles. But my point being, the story told through the editing and shots alone makes this a great and highly entertaining watch. That's in no way to say everything else about this movie is bad, but so far this movie is good enough that I'm curious why it's only 99th in the list. But that does make me a bit excited for the rest of the films coming up. It definitely isn't, but doing it out in the middle of a field right after ceremoniously laying down a bra and panties while you wear frilly red underwear feels like it should be though. It turns out he's a church-going regular member of society with a sick wife and 2 kids at home, so he chooses to jerk off in the woods for privacy. And I think he also likes the fantasy of the crime scenes, I guess. So he's mostly a normal or regular pervert, not like the murdering kind of pervert. I guess he just needs some therapy. Maybe, but that doesn't stop the other 2 detectives going back to old reliable police brutality. While the competent detective goes to the school to investigate the outhouse in the children's story and ends up stumbling on a survivor of the killer. I might have missed something, but they don't do a great job of concretely tying her to the murderer as a possible victim. They just show her as someone afraid of men, and the detective notices she has red underwear and was heard crying a lot by one of the teachers, which feels a bit flimsy as a plot narrative, but that could be because I missed something. The 2 detectives fight once again over methods, and while they were doing that, a young woman was killed. And as though in some gruesome and morbid way to up the ante, the killer put 9 pieces of a peach inside of her vagina. And quite frankly, I have to say that is a bit of an insane detail. I like true crime, podcasts, shows, cold cases, any of that stuff, you name it. I'm a fan. And a killer putting peaches inside of a victim is a level of depravity I don't think I've ever quite heard before, which, as odd as it sounds, is kind of impressive to me, that I can still be shocked by something like that. This is a completely irrelevant detail, but I love in all the anime, Japanese, and Korean movies I've ever seen, it doesn't matter how tense or time sensitive what's happening in a home is, they always take their shoes off. Someone could be dying in the living room, or like these 2, investigating the home of a suspected serial killer, and they're still gonna take a moment to remove their shoes. So they arrest their suspect and do another police brutality, and they have to let the guy go because they don't have anything. This also leads to them realizing that the disabled man from earlier was actually a witness to the murder, which I figured out already, but no big deal of course. But just finding the guy and asking him a couple questions would be way too easy narratively. So through happenstance, the disabled man is playing in front of the train tracks and then gets hit by a train. RIP to a real one. He just wanted to be loved by a pretty girl, and in that desire tired, aren't we all a severely burned, mentally stunted Korean man? Anyway, just before he ran off and got killed like a badass, the ass-kicking detective started a fight and overstimulated him, and Kang-ho, which I believe is his name, hit the ass-kicking detective with a piece of wood with a nail in it, and the nail pierced his skin. He didn't get it checked out and had to get it amputated. He lost his ass-kicking leg, unfortunately, and I kind of like that I can't tell where things are going. In other movies, you can very easily tell the A to B points in the story that will tie everything together in a neat little bow in the end. But when there's moments in a movie like dude getting his leg chopped off that make me go, does that have a larger point? How does this scene help them get to the final scene in the story? I often enjoy the story a lot more because I get to immerse myself and not have to think, where is this going ultimately? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a point. No one's life is so exciting that every single moment of it is this big grand ordeal that is full of tension and connecting plot points and character development. Sometimes you're just sitting in a doctor's office or brushing your teeth. Not every single point of a movie needs to lead to this greater ordeal. Sometimes it's just nice to show the realism of existence, I think. I hope I'm explaining that correctly. I think my greater point is that sometimes just watching a character brush their teeth is just as exciting and humanizing as watching them go through a breakup, and also gives the story a level of realism. Unfortunately, another victim is found, this time a schoolgirl, and the DNA samples they sent back to America determined that their golden ticket suspect couldn't have been the murderer, so it's back to square one. A subplot in the movie I really enjoy is the emotional, mental, and physical toll this case has had for everyone involved. The young detective just dragged a man into the rain to pistol whip, beat, and threaten to kill him, even though technically he is innocent. This very well might be the killer, but they have no conclusive evidence that he is. And I condone none of this. You shouldn't even talk to cops unless you have a lawyer present. But this movie has done a phenomenal job of making me sympathize to some degree with the actions of the detectives. At a certain point, anyone would be desperate just to make the pain stop, just like the people they often tortured throughout the film. I'll say or do whatever you want me to do just to make the pain go away, and these detectives just want the pain being inflicted upon these women in this small town to stop by any means. And I definitely get that. Their resources are limited, and this killer is a sicko. It makes even more sense when you realize that the latest victim was the little girl that the younger detective spoke to several times throughout the film. Do I support bro blasting away in a tunnel at someone, as far as we know, who is innocent? No. Would I also go insane trying to solve a gruesome, nigh impossible string of murders? Absolutely. 20 years go by and the lead detective has a wife and 2 kids, but he is no longer a detective. He sells juicers. On his way somewhere, as he has a business call, he sees the train that started the movie and the case that probably took pieces of his soul and ended his career. He is inspecting it, and a little girl stops him to ask why, because another man, presumably the killer, was looking in the same spot recently. The former detective tries to ask the girl what he looked like, and all she says is he was a plain looking, ordinary man. And the movie ends just before the man stares into the camera as though he might burst into tears, staring at the audience as we stare into what's left of his soul, and then it just ends. It's a bit hard to process everything, but overall I love the movie. The scenery, the intensity, the music, the acting. This is bar for bar deserving of being in the top 100 of the 21st century. I've always had a love for Korean films, as the first one I saw, Old Boy, opened my eyes to a new way of storytelling. Korean films often feel close to real life, especially compared to a lot of American films where the hero catches the bad guy, always gets the girl, and the day is always saved. Often in a lot of Korean films, life just kind of goes on. There's no happy ending, just the next chapter, because unfortunately no matter how much we suffer in life, it continues, and bad people don't always get punished. I think the best way to describe Korean films is that they're a lot like a whirlwind romance, full of emotion and passion and intense good moments that leave you with impactful memories, and then out of nowhere they kick you in the nuts, kiss you on the forehead, and thank you for the good time before blocking you on everything without ever telling you why. And maybe that's why I like them. Yeah, they don't always end how I would have liked, but damn did I have a good time while I was in it. Thanks for watching.